whatever life throws at you, you can still just, with the sense of community and the determination to have your land back and your life and your sense of who you are, you can get through everything and stay together and united and sing with such joy. And I think I can't find anything more inspiring than that, really. I'm Sophie Grig from Survival International, and I share hope.
Welcome to I Share Hope, the podcast where world leaders share their real stories of hope and how you can use actionable hope to start changing your life today. And now, here's your host, Chris Williams.
Hello.
Hello, Sophie. How are you doing?
Hi. Yeah, good, thank you. Oh, you can't see me, can you?
Well, I'll be able to see you in a minute. No, it doesn't let me see
I
it
think.
yet.
Is that better? I think that should be coming.
I can see you now.
Right. Hello.
How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you.
So you're in London right now?
No, I'm actually at home in Northamptonshire, which I'm working from home today. So I'm about 100 miles north of London.
Do you commute into London very often?
A bit. I go in a couple of times a week and work from home the rest of the time. So it's not too bad.
That's not too bad at all. Yeah.
No, it's very nice because I'm in the countryside when I'm at home. So.
Oh, that's beautiful, I bet.
Yeah, it's lovely and it's sunny today. So
even better.
It's good.
Okay, so if I get this right, Sophie Grig, you are, I'm going to try to make sure I really understand who you are and where you are in what you're doing for the world. So Survival International, I've heard about that for years and years, never read about it as much as I have when I started learning about you. And it's fascinating because we're all kind of interested in those peoples that are out there that really aren't connected to our, I'm going to call it modern society. I hate to use all these terms because I know there's arguments for what terms to use that are right. But, my iPhone, or the fact that we're doing this on Skype, or that, somebody could watch us on YouTube or listen to a podcast or drive their car. A lot of people in the world simply don't do that, not because of their poverty, but because they are living the way their ancestors have lived for hundreds or thousands of years. And it's working great for them. And so Survival International, if I get this right, is all about making sure that those people can live the way they want to live, and that we're not forcing what we think is better for them on them.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what Survival does. It's campaigning for the rights of tribal peoples to make their own choices about their ways of life, and also to protect their land, because without their land, they can't make those choices. Just a couple of things in your introduction. We would definitely say that tribal people don't live the same as they have done, or the same as their ancestors did, because tribal people, like all people, have changed and evolved over the many generations, but they live an entirely distinct way from the mainstream. And I agree. You winced at the word modern, and I think you're right to wince at that word, because that sort of suggests that they're not modern or contemporary, whereas of course they are. So I suppose mainstream world or something is a better word to use. But yes, I mean, that's essentially what we do, and it's obviously, I think it's the most important thing in the world.
So just so I can get some terms nailed down, because I think anybody who's listening or watching, this is going to be really, really helpful. So if I'm getting this right, peoples are defined by our characteristics, or our color, our creed, our who we are as a group. So me and my family, we are peoples, not just plural humans, but a people that are identified by the way we are. An indigenous population is a population who was there first, and potentially could have gotten pushed out or pushed around by colonization of some sort. Yeah. Then tribes are peoples who have made that a little more official. They actually have an organized society and are recognized, more importantly, recognized by the outside encroaching world. I'm
not sure. Well, I would say a tribe is a sort of, they don't necessarily have to be sort of official or officially recognized. It's sort of the self-defining group and people, in the same way as I suppose that we would define tribal people as indigenous people who are still living very closely connected to the land, rather than it being a sort of political description.
Gotcha. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. And you are the senior campaigner for Survival International, is that right?
I am a senior campaigner. There's a couple of us, but yes, so I am a senior campaigner. I've been doing it for the last 21 years. So it's,
Thank you.
A major part of my life.
Thank you. All right, this is really cool. So you have a bachelor's degree in religious studies and anthropology from University of Lancaster and a master's in philosophy and anthropology from Cambridge, right?
Yep, that's right.
I think it's really cool that so anthropology, I did not even say what I think is cool yet. I think it's cool that you have so much education in this area, and you're helping people that are as smart, and I'm going to use the word modern again, and as modern as we are, and just they've grown up and learned in a different way than you have, without an official college degree.
Yeah.
How does anthropology help you with these people?
I suppose my anthropology was a long time ago, and in many ways, the reason I studied anthropology was because I already had a passion for campaigning for tribal peoples. And so it was almost the other way around, that I got into anthropology because I wanted to work for survival and be involved in that, rather than I sort of found out about it through anthropology. And so, but I suppose that sort of working with and concern and compassion for different peoples and their different ways of life, and thinking that this sort of diversity in the world is such a fantastic thing is what sort of drives people into anthropology, and that's sort of what the discipline began as, and is such an important part of it.
Very cool. So a question that first pops in my head, and then we'll get to our 5 questions about hope. But people often, like, I guess in our context, in our cultural context, we would think, oh, but we're actually helping people by bringing them out of a very primitive, sorry again for all these terms, I'm trying to pick my way through it, but let's keep rolling. So a primitive lifestyle compared to what our culture would experience, and we're helping them by bringing them into that. And but their grandkids are going to have an education, and they're going to have a desk job and be able to type and send emails, but that's not necessarily such a great thing.
No, and absolutely, that's one of the biggest problems, is that many people who think along those lines and look at tribal people, look at the fact that they materially have very little, and think, look at them, they must be poor, they must need help and need what we have. And that often involves things like taking the children away from the community and sending them to schools, as has been disastrous in North America and Australia and is still happening in many parts of the world today, taking people from their land. And what tribal people tell us is that they want to be able to make their own choices. And of course they do. Everybody wants to make their own choices. And so tribal people say, on our land, we live like kings. We're happy here. We school our children our own way. Some tribal people, of course, want to send their children to external schools, but they want that to be done with respect for their way of life, and for the teachers at the schools to be able to speak the tribal language, and to be able to give a culturally appropriate education that doesn't undermine the way of life of the tribe. And so those sort of misunderstandings and misapprehensions of this idea that tribal people are in some way backward and stuck in the past and need help to be brought into the modern world are behind actually a lot of the devastating things that are happening to tribal people today. And what tribal people tell us all the time is, what we need is our land. It's crazy when these outsiders come in and tell us what development should be, or to try to change us. We want to make our own choices and choose to change in whatever way we choose, but on our own land, in our own way.
That makes a lot of sense. It really does. And it is the way I'd want to be treated,
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. Okay, Sophie, so you know what we're doing. We're interviewing 1,000 people who are leading their niche of the world in a very hopeful way. So thank you, first of all, for being such an obvious choice. Thank you. So what we're doing is we're asking everybody these same 5 questions. So these questions are you and your answers. You don't have to go along with, there's no agenda here. There's no past pattern you got to follow. So I want to know what you think about hope and how you work within that realm. So can I fire these questions at you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Question 1, what's your favorite quote about hope, or your definition of hope?
Well, I did go and have a look through many things that tribal people have said about hope, and wanted to bring something from a Guarani woman who's talking about hope. And the Guarani Kaiowá live in Brazil. Over 100 years have been thrown off their land, and the Guarani are really struggling, living at the side of a busy road, desperate to try and reclaim their land. And Marta Guarani said, "I think of the conditions in which we live, abject poverty, those little houses, we have nothing to eat, and yet our people still sing with such joy, with such hope, always in search of the land without evil, a place of freedom and without violence. We Indians don't want money or riches. Do you know what we want? We just want enough land to live on how we like."
Wow.
And I just think that's so inspiring, because the Guarani really have lost everything. They are desperate. They're being shot at by police in Brazil. They've had their land taken. And they're, instead of just giving up and going and living in cities in a shanty town, as so many other people would have done, the Guarani have absolutely determinedly hung on. They're living in these tiny strips of land, and having these retonadas where they go to and reclaim back some of their land, where they often then get sent back by ranchers and violence and the police. But they still have maintained this unbelievable strength and dignity. And I think they give everyone hope that you can, whatever life throws at you, you can still just, with the sense of community and the determination to have your land back and your life and your sense of who you are, you can, get through everything and stay together and united and sing with such joy. And I think that's, I can't find anything more inspiring than that, really.
That's beautiful. Great quote, great example also, living it out. That's a tough life. What's brought on their problem? Like, is it just people needing the land for ranching, foresting, industrial uses? Is it that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's huge agro industry. It's a really rich part of Brazil with huge plantations and cotton plantations, sugar plantations. And the Guarani have just been pushed to the side and evicted over generations. And in the past, the government would tell them, this is for your own good. We're going to bring you development. We're going to bring you all these things. And actually, they've ended up with the highest suicide rate in the world, and with murders and such violence. But despite that, there is this, there's such a strong group of leaders, and often the Guarani, the women, they're really strong women leaders. There's a woman called Damiana whose husband and three of her sons were killed on the busy road that they live alongside. And she just, again, she's leading her people, leading these sort of returns where they go back to the land. And she says, our hope is that patch of land, is the land to get our forest back. And that's our hope. And that's what keeps them going. And it's just very inspiring.
Wow. Okay, so who in your life has shared the most of that kind of hope with you? Obviously, she's a great example, but give me an example or two of somebody who's really poured that into your life.
I suppose maybe I'm a bit single-tracked, but I've been thinking of another tribe, actually, the Dongri Accord, who live in India. And there's about 8,000 of them, and they live up in the mountains in Orissa, and their mountain is sacred to them. They call it Niyam Raja. And they live on an enormous mountain of bauxite, and Vedanta Resources, which is a UK Indian international company, was on the FTSE 100 index. They wanted to mine on the Dongria's sacred land, and the Dongria fought it and resisted and were so incredibly strong. And it was such a David and Goliath battle, and they won, and survival worked with them. And they just with their absolute sort of tenacity and determination and love for their life. They say, in our forest, we live like kings. We're rich in our life. We don't need all this. We don't, the company was trying to throw all sorts of development things at them. And they said, that's not what we want. Here we can live for nothing. Where you live in the city, you have to pay for water. You have to pay for food. We get everything here for free. We live like kings. And they, through their sort of courage and speaking out, and we were helping to share their message around the world. And in the end, the Supreme Court in India ordered that that they must be questioned and asked. And if the Dongri said that they didn't want the mine, then it shouldn't go ahead. And this was absolutely revolutionary in India, and it happened, and they were these security guards and people watching them, and it's such intimidation for remote people who don't have a lot of contact with the outside world, and they absolutely unanimously voted against the mine, and the mine was not allowed to go ahead. And I just think, if 8,000 people living on a hilltop can stop a massively huge international company and all the weight behind it, and the security forces harassing and arresting and threatening people, but their sort of strength can stand up against that. And also just thousands of people around the world wrote letters and got involved. And that's also really inspiring, that people around the world can sort of understand, and they don't look at these people and think, oh, they're so different from me, I can't relate. They can really, bring people together and just make a difference. And I suppose that's the one story, if I think, what really sort of makes me think, God, the world, we can make a difference. That was such an unwinnable, it seemed impossible that they could stop that mine, yet they did.
That's so inspiring. So are those people aware of the thousands of letters and the thousands of people outside of their view that are supporting them? Can you communicate that to them?
Yeah, so we went back after the mine was stopped. We went back and took a video we'd made a video of their battle, which had been viewed hundreds and hundreds of thousands of times before, and encouraged people to write letters and get involved and lobby. And then we made another bit of film which showed all the letters and the protests and things that had happened, which we took back and showed to them. And that was also very inspiring for them to know that people outside cared. And I often find that when I visit a tribal community, that they're so used to all their neighbors looking down on them and being prejudiced and sort of treating them like they're backward and primitive, that when I turn up and I'm saying, no, there's thousands of people around the world who are really interested in your way of life and think it's fantastic that there are hunter-gatherers and really understand and respect your need for the forest. And I show them, I have like a photo of a demonstration which has got 250,000 people at it. And I say, look, this is how many people, like, every few weeks look at Survival's website and see and know about what's happening in your lives. And I've taken this to communities where there's like 30 people in the village, and they just cannot believe that there's that many people exist, let alone that many people care about them. And it's so nice to be able to let people know that there are, outside their immediate neighbors, who are often really quite horrible to them, obviously not always, but sometimes, that, there is a whole community of people who care about them and want them to be able to have their rights respected and to be able to live how they want to live.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love it. That's really exciting. So this is your turn, not the tribal people's turn. So
oh no. Sure.
Sophie Grig is a real person too.
Oh my God.
You live on your own hilltop somewhere, right? So we need to know about you. Take us back to a time in your life when you've had to really rely on the kind of hope you're talking about. Because quite honestly, for most of us watching or listening, we look at a person like you and we think, wow, well, obviously she's doing great. I mean, look where she's at and look what she's doing and look how many people she's helping and her position and where she has to travel to. But is that the way it is for you? Is it just all peaches and cream?
Well, I think I am probably a very sort of optimistic, cheerful, look on the bright side of things sort of person. And maybe that actually you have to be when you're working with the sorts of things that I work with, because obviously, although I'm talking about a lot of the positive things, there's a lot of negative sides. I mean, I suppose, and maybe this is not nearly enough about myself, but I wrote a report and I spent about a year researching a paper that we produced called Progress Can Kill, which is all about the terrible things that have happened to tribal people. So the high suicide rates, the poverty when people are thrown off their land, the addictions. And that was incredibly hard because every day I was just reading the saddest, most tragic stories. And those things, it is very difficult to just read that again and again and then just, get back up off my chair and either go and try and do something work related or cook my kids their supper or whatever. And so it's those things are, it's difficult not to feel overwhelmed sometimes by the negative and the sad things that happen. But I think with stories like the Dongri is knowing that there is a solution, and the solution is actually often very simple in terms of land and people being able to connect back to their land, even in places with, for example, Aboriginal communities who've had suffered decades of poverty and problems with alcohol and all the things that have been generated as a result of the stolen generation and the things that have happened to them and the loss of their land, that you can see there are communities there who are working and bringing their own solutions to these terrible things that have happened to them. And so taking young children or teenagers who've been suicidal or have drink or drug problems, taking them out to the land and reconnecting them with the land and the community and the way of life. And those things are really heartwarming and inspiring. And I suppose those are the things that helped get me through when I was just spending day after day reading suicide statistics and those terrible things. And I think there's always something that you can look on that can make you see the positive and the bright side of things. And, fortunately, you can see solutions in those things that can help make these things seem better.
Great comments. Great comments. A lot of people do have a job that, for whatever reason, has some pretty depressing parts to it. If they're in the medical field, they could be dealing with really ill people all day. It could be a lot of things, but it is nice to be able to come back to some center point and regain what it is you're doing and why you're going through all of that hard data and hard experience, Cool. Number 4, how are you sharing hope today? So what does your day look like as somebody working for the organization you're with, also as just a human who's out there getting a cup of coffee and going to the grocery store?
Right. Well, my day started with getting my kids ready and off for school, which is always fun and always feels a little bit like you've done a day's work before you start a day's work. And then today I phoned up a hospital in India where a 7-year-old boy is being treated after being shot in the legs by armed guards in a national park where the guards are allowed to shoot to kill with impunity up in against poachers, and that also means that tribal people living on the edges often get caught up in it. And this was a 7-year-old boy walking to the shops, and somehow an armed guard who's a bit trigger happy shot him in the legs. And so I was contacted by people from his community who said, we don't feel like he's getting proper treatment. So I phoned up the hospital to say what's happening, to hope that they could feel some pressure for international concern about what's happening with the boy, to make sure that his treatment is done properly. So that was my first thing to be doing today.
Awesome. Yeah.
And we're doing a lot of work on that sort of thing and challenging the violence in national parks. And so that's the sort of negative side of things. But at the same time, we know that tribal people all around the world are the best conservationists, and those people are protecting their lands. And statistics show that where tribal people's land rights are recognized, those are the bits of forest that are best protected. And you can see these amazing satellite images of the Amazon, where you can see where the forest is still intact, and those are the areas where indigenous people have their lands. And so getting that message across, the sort of positives as well as the negatives, the challenging where things are going wrong, but also just celebrating and encouraging people to get involved and take action for the rights of tribal peoples and the rights of all humanity, really, because it's connected. You protect the rights of tribal peoples and the planet gets protected too.
It's a great example of what we're talking about, sharing hope with. I mean, from a professional standpoint, calling a hospital, never thought about that, but that makes sense. You're not just raising resources and protecting land, but it's not a little thing. It's somebody's kid who got shot in the leg. That's jumping in and getting your hands dirty. I love that.
Well,
So, do you guys get a lot of threats? I mean, you're up against some really powerful government and corporate forces that are willing to use violence to get their stuff done, and y'all are
yeah.
kind of getting in the way.
Well, we do get threats, and we're also getting banned from places. So unfortunately, I've been banned from India at the moment. They're not allowing us in, anyone from Survival, because of our campaign in support of the Dongri Accord. It was decided that that was going to damage the growth of India, those sorts of
Wow.
campaigns, and so we're not allowed in, which makes things, that's very frustrating. I want to be there, and I want to go and, sit and stand in the hospital and directly say to the hospital people, why aren't you treating this kid better? And so that's very frustrating. And we've also had threats in the past and pressure from various different governments and things. But, you've just got to carry on, and you've got to believe that we're doing the right thing. And we know that it works. The campaigns that we run, we've seen successes again and again. There's many tribal people have said to us, if it wasn't for Survival, we'd be dead by now. And, that makes a huge difference. And it how important it is, and how actually international people getting together to make a big noise, make a fuss, even sending hundreds of emails, it makes a massive difference. We've had, there were some fires in the Brazilian Amazon last year, and the government was or the firefighters were not focusing on indigenous areas. They were focusing on the area, putting out the fires in the areas where the plantations and things were. And so we got our supporters to write, and there was a particular area of uncontacted Indians, and saying, you must protect this area. These people are incredibly vulnerable. And we asked our supporters to email the department in charge of this. And after a couple of days, the woman in charge of the department rang up our office and said, please, could you ask people to stop sending all these emails? We're going to do something.
Enough already.
Yeah. And so, and we've been to places where judges have unearthed huge piles of letters from Survival supporters and said, this made a real difference to our case. And so we see again and again that actually individual people getting involved, using their time and their energy and enthusiasm to really sort of just do something makes an unbelievable difference. And it's the difference between life and death for whole communities.
Wow, that's cool. It really is. So you mentioned a word a minute ago, uncontacted peoples.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the ones who, obviously, everyone has contact with someone. We all have somebody out there that we can see or yell at or whatever, but these are people that don't have a regular or frequent contact with what we would call our culture,
Absolutely.
our progressive culture. Yeah. Okay.
So we think there's more than 100 tribes around the world that have got no contact with the mainstream society in their area at all. And in fact, what I find so amazing is that the number is growing. So about a decade ago, the Brazilian government have a specific department that is just focusing on monitoring and protecting and working out where these uncontacted people are. And about a decade ago, they thought there were about 40 uncontacted peoples or groups of peoples in the Brazilian Amazon, and they now think there's more than 70. So the numbers are just going up. They're increasingly coming across more uncontacted peoples. And I just think it's fantastic that in such a sort of globalized, pressurized world, there are people entirely self-sufficient, entirely living on their own land, doing their own thing. And it's not like these people don't know about outside. When people have contact, they always seem to know an awful lot more about the outside world than the outside world knows about them. So they've often been watching, and they've seen what's been going on, and they've largely chosen not to take a part in it. And it's an active choice. And we really strongly believe that that's their right, and that must be protected. And so any attempt to try and force contact with them is dangerous, but also wrong, because it's their choice to do that. And I think it's wonderful that there's people out there who are making that choice and living so self-sufficiently and self-sustainably, and it's just, that gives me hope, I think.
That's great. All right, last question. Simple steps, the ABCs, kind of some 1, 2, 3s. How can we start growing as people of hope, or sharing hope, when we get done listening and watching you?
Well, I would say go and find out about tribal people because, as I've explained, the stories are so inspiring and the solutions are actually very simple. The solutions are not expensive or difficult. It's recognizing land rights and letting people, respecting people and letting them have the right to make their own choices about how they live their lives. That is a really simple solution to a whole load of problems that are being created for tribal people that are so unnecessary. And so get involved, find out about survival, find out about tribal people, tell other people about it, tell people about uncontacted tribes. You know, everybody is fascinated by this notion that there are people out there who have no contact. And you can get involved and you can make a massive difference with very little energy. You can send an email, sign a petition, write a letter, donate some money, hold a tea party, you know, all of these things, just little steps. And actually, thousands of people taking little steps makes all the difference. And we can see that the Dongri Accord's mountain has been saved, the Awa's forest has been cleared of ranchers. All these things that the Bushmen have been, the court has said they're allowed back on their land, all of these things because of people getting involved with survival's campaigns and taking action. And that's all it takes, little steps by many people, and you can make such a massive difference. And to be part of that and to know that you've been part of that, I think is a wonderful thing that can make, you know, keep you going through the day.
Yeah, that's great. So how do we contact you guys? survivalinternational.com or .org?
.org.
Great.
So we got a website, .org. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, just search Survival International, and yeah, just get in touch and get involved. And we have offices in the US, in the UK, in France, Germany, Netherlands, Spain. So wherever people are, there's probably someone not that far away that, you know, or just get in touch with us or look at our website and spread the word.
That's awesome. And you, Sophie Grig, your Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff, do you mind us sharing that?
Oh, I don't really do any of that.
Okay. We'll stick with survival.
I stick with survival. I don't have anything like that, really.
Great. All right. We'll put all of that at isharehope.com. So if you're out for a run or at the store, wherever you are listening or watching, you don't have to write this stuff down. isharehope.com. Look for Sophie Grig's interview. You'll see it in the interview section, and we'll have the transcribed notes, we'll have video, everything there, and you can find all her links, all the stuff about survival. It'll be in one spot for you. This is fantastic. So where's your next big trip?
Well, I'm desperately trying to get back into India. That's my plan, but I'm battling a bit at the moment to do that. So.
Everybody needs to sign a petition saying that Sophie's allowed to go to India.
Get me back in.
And so you have kids. I mean, but when you travel, it sounds like you would have to be out for months. Or
well,
is it simply
actually,
a week or two?
I did used to go for months and months, and I don't anymore. I have to go for shorter trips more often. And yeah, they're not that chuffed when I go away, but I think they're also quite proud of what I do, and they know how important it is, so they're quite understanding.
All right, last question. So you've been a lot of places in the world. Where is your favorite place, most beautiful place? If you could say you got to visit here, where is that? I don't mean not us visiting a people group that doesn't need to have visitors, but you know what I'm saying.
I would say the Papuan Highlands. They are the most unbelievably beautiful place. So in West Papua, which is the other half of the island of Papua New Guinea, which is at the moment colonized by Indonesia, but there is the highlands in the central West Papuan Highlands are unbelievably beautiful views, fantastic people, just breathtaking. And if it wasn't for the Indonesian military crawling around, you would have a lovely time there. But it's wonderful, definitely my favorite place.
So if we go, we need to have our own personal security force?
Yes, unfortunately.
Okay. I was loving your recommendation until then.
Up until that point.
Well, you would know. You've been places in the world that few people have gone, or few people like us have gone.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Sophie, give me one more quote at the beginning of each podcast. We let you introduce yourself. So I'm Sophie Grig, and I Share Hope, or I'm Sophie Grig with Survival International, or one of the most uniquely traveled people in the world, and I Share Hope. Whatever you want to say. Your name, something, and I Share Hope.
Okay, I'm Sophie Grig from Survival International, and I share hope.
That's perfect.
Is that all right?
That works great. Yeah. Sophie, can't thank you enough for your time. I know
Oh, no,
you're busy.
that's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
We'll talk to you soon. Okay,
Goodbye.
bye-bye.
You've just listened to I Share Hope. If you're ready to make a change, head to our website at isharehope.com and claim your free copy of the top 10 actions of hope from world leaders to use hope in your own life. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.